Here we go.
Hi folks, my name is Frankie. I will be informing you on why Donald Trump is a fascist. I would like to begin with pointing out that because fascism is most commonly related to Hitler or Italy in Mussolini, in World War II, fascism has infiltrated the U.S. government with Father Charles Coughlin in the 1930s, so it is possible for fascism to infiltrate the U.S. Now that we've established that it's possible, I'd like to point out that Donald Trump has adopted many fascistic policies. As of yesterday, we found out he is the candidate for the Republican Party. That is a right wing, but he is extremely right-wing, fascistic, and I'd also like to begin with defining fascism. It is hard to define because it is applied in so many different forms throughout history, but Merriam-Webster defines fascism as a political philosophy, a movement or regime that exalts nations and often raise above the individual, and that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. So I'd like to first establish that Donald Trump is creating a majority. This is a pillar of fascism. It is the majority versus the enemy, essentially, as opposed to in Western democracy and pluralism in our democracy, whereas we have the majority versus the minority. There's no minority in fascism. There's just the enemy, they don't agree with us, and we need to get rid of them. Donald Trump is establishing a majority, and according to Matthew Lyons in his article, What is Fascism? Fascism's approach to politics both harbors populism and elitism, and in other words, it's activating one group as a whole and inciting it against another enemy. Trump is basically rallying his organic community of xenophobic Americans, and his enemy are immigrants of all kinds that would like citizenship and to live in the U.S. to seek refuge. He would like to call for the mass deportation of all immigrants. This is a pillar of fascism. My second point would be that Trump is applying racial scapegoating. This is another pillar of, according to Lyons, of fascism. Trump blames Mexican Americans for the war on drugs, unemployment, and the overall fall of America. Trump has been quoted to refer to the Mexican community as criminals and rapists. Lastly, Trump is attempting to integrate his beliefs of control through mass organization, which is another pillar of fascism. Trump's called for the mass deportation of Mexican immigrants through ICE, and not only do these fascistic ideals apply to Mexican immigrants, but he calls for the mass registration of Muslim Americans, which, if we can look back throughout history, draw a comparison to Hitler, who is similar of Hitler's treatment of the Jews in Nazi Germany. So, to go back over my points of why Trump is a fascist, he is establishing a majority and an enemy and calling for the rise of the majority and for negative implications of the enemy. He is racial scapegoating and ethnically persecuting Mexican Americans, and not only Mexican Americans but all immigrants. And in order to apply his policies, he is calling for the integration of mass organizations, which is ICE, and a mass registration of the Muslim Americans. Thank you.
you.
No, he was just like, did this, and then like the whole thing was
All right, Frankie, at the beginning, you make it sound like it's an informative speech. I think you even used the term inform us about something and why he is a fascist. That's a question that you're asking, basically. You want the declarative statement. You got a nice declarative statement right here on your rubric, so go ahead and use that. Don't be shy about that. I think you do at the end make that argument, but at the beginning you sound like you're backing into the argument. There's a little bit of a preview of the structure. I think some of the claims need to be phrased a little bit more deliberately so that we can see exactly where you're going. And I think when you get at the end and you're summarizing, you can see that there is a problem, especially with that third point, that it's kind of ambiguous as to what all of that information is supposed to, what conclusion that information is supposed to be leading us to. But I could see that there is a structure in the presentation, so that's pretty good. You start off by kind of defining what the characteristics of fascism are, and because there's some ambiguity on that, I think that it makes it a little bit harder to apply some of the things that you're talking about, but some of the characteristics that you described certainly seem to fit into this. There's a theory about this majority against the outsider group that needs to be explained and defined a little bit more. I think you need some information on that. Your example of this is, well, you say Trump is doing it, and I'm going, okay, so what are the examples of him doing those sorts of things? And I think you need a little bit more specific information about this, because otherwise the only examples that you have are the same thing that you're using on the second point, which is the xenophobia about Mexicans and about Muslims that he's dealing with. I don't know that the party affiliation gets you anything. I think that if there's an argument that says fascism is only associated with the right wing, then maybe there is some connection there, although my understanding is that the right-wing people think that Trump is probably a fascist too. They think that they got all kinds of problems. They got issues about the authoritarian nature. So, for example, here's a good point. When you say it's an authoritarian kind of thing, so what has Trump said that makes him sound so authoritarian? We're going to do this. I'm going to force this through. This is not going to happen. When I'm in charge, this is the way things are going to be. You need to give those illustrations to illustrate that point.
Things from Trump.
Yeah, I mean, here's the stuff that Trump says that is consistent with being a fascist. And suppression of other opinions, for instance, you mentioned that at one point. So what has he done? What has he proposed? What action has he taken to do those sorts of things? I think there are examples out there that you could point to and use. You don't have them in your speech, though. You just kind of assume that either people will know them or they'll just believe you when you say it. So I think you need to have a little bit more of that. I think you're better on the second point when you try and tie in some of the things that he said about the other groups, where he talks about blaming Mexicans and immigrants for all kinds of problems. There you're a little bit clearer. Again, I do think that people have heard those sorts of things, but you could quote him directly. Here's a speech that Trump gave in New York 4 months ago where he said this, that, and the other thing about this particular group. And this is not moderated in tone. This is not nuanced in policy. This is about specific groups. And you could have that example. So I think there is information out there that fits your argument, but you're kind of just assuming that people are going to be familiar enough with that, and I'm not sure everybody would be. I thought at the end that the summary helps structure your speech a lot more effectively, so I can kind of see how all this information is supposed to be put together. And a lot of times people rescue their organizational structure, because I thought it felt a little bit like you were wandering around in the middle. And although I think your third point is still ambiguous, I'm not sure why it's distinct from the second point at all. It just seems like it's a different example of the second point to me. At least I could see what those other 2 points were very clearly. All right, thank you.